Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Sports Luck Podcast. I'm your host, Ben Mossdaller, and we got our Week 7 podcast here for you today. We're doing predictions, bets, daily fantasy, and start sit as usual. So make sure you follow, subscribe wherever you can. I am on TikTok as well, and on Wednesdays, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time, I'm going to be going live on my personal account, the Beast Benny Cakes. Yes, my nickname is Benny Cakes. But that account is where I can go live until I get to 1,000 subscribers, followers on the Sports Lock podcast TikTok. So until then, Wednesdays at 9:30, I'll be going live answering your start sit questions, sports bet, anything like that. We will be doing that. And last Wednesday was the first time I tried this out. I had a really good reaction with it from viewers. I believe I had almost 4,000 in there answering everybody's questions. So a lot of fun. And I believe this week or sometime in the future, I am going to try to get back on Charlotte Haggerty over on TikTok. We're going to do it together, answering viewer questions, giving our opinions. With a plan is to do it this coming Wednesday. If you're watching this, that would be the 19th of October. If not, Wednesdays, 9:30 Eastern Time. Make sure to go on the Beast Benny Cakes TikTok to ask questions, and I'm going to answer them all. Start, sit, basic fantasy trades, and daily fantasy sports betting, all of that good stuff. So you don't want to miss out. But also make sure you follow the podcast account where I make videos over there in regards to sports betting and fantasy football. That is Sports Lock Podcast. Let's take a look back at week 6. Wasn't terrible. Could have been better, though, of course. Predictions and spread were both 9 and 5. The over and under is probably one of our worst weeks at 6 and 8. And our locks were 2 and 2. Not doing well on the locks so far. Chicago lost on Thursday night. I thought that would be a team that would win. We did hit Atlanta to cover the 5.5, as well as Tampa Bay and Pittsburgh to go under. Unfortunately, the Colts and the Jaguars went over the 42. I believe it was 42.5. So that was our other loss there. But we always have to move forward, and we'll move forward to week 7 in a moment. But let's take a look at our week 6 daily fantasy results. Not the best, but not terrible. You might have been able to win some money here, especially with the start. Kirk Cousins, for the price that we paid for him, 16.5, the 12th best fantasy quarterback. Not terrible. 175 yards and 2 touchdowns. But we take a look at the running backs and just incredibly killed it with our running backs this week. Starting once again with Leonard Fournette. We've been riding him the last few weeks. He has had another big week. 5th amongst running backs, 63 rushing yards, 6 receptions, 38 yards, and a touchdown. He's getting very involved in the passing game, which is why he's been one of the top backs in the last few weeks and on the season. We also went with Breece Hall, who was one spot behind Leonard Fournette, 20.1 fantasy points this past week. He had 116 yards and a touchdown. And then we went with Kenneth Walker of the Seattle Seahawks, the new starting running back rookie out of Michigan State. He went for 97 yards and a touchdown, 8th best amongst running backs. Now, the wide receivers weren't that great, and that's been a kind of a struggle for us. Justin Jefferson, we paid up for a lot. He got 16.7 fantasy points, 15th. For the price we paid, we could have got better value. But again, I thought Justin Jefferson would have a better week. Tyler Lockett absolutely did terrible. He only had 2 receptions for 17 yards, and Romeo Doubs, for how cheap he is, 6.1. Again, could be better. 4 receptions, 21 yards. We take a look at Hayden Hurst. He only was able to put up 5.1 fantasy points. And the Cowboys defense, who are one of the best in the league, only 4 points against the Eagles, which gets us to a total of 113.3. Again, we've done better. I believe we did better last week, but we just have to keep going. We had 2 very good daily fantasy weeks, winning both if you put that lineup in. But this past week probably wouldn't have gotten you in the money, depending on who you faced. Our start sit results, again, are kind of similar to our daily fantasy. We said to start Kirk Cousins, and again, he did okay, but the sit was a really big backfire. Matt Ryan, 27.6 fantasy points, the second best quarterback, right behind Joe Burrow in week 6. That really hurt there. I did not expect that out of him after a couple rough weeks. 389 passing yards and 3 touchdowns, especially against the Jaguars defense, who's been pretty good. The start, Ken Walker, I already told you why. He's going to go ballistic there in Seattle. I said to sit Ezekiel Elliott, but he actually performed probably his best of the season, 15.6 fantasy points, 12th amongst running backs. At wide receiver, told you to start Tyler Lockett. A lot of people were saying to start Lockett this past week because he has a good track record against the Cardinals, but just a very poor performance and a bad performance by Geno Smith. Sitting Deontay Johnson, not bad at all, 8.6 fantasy points, 42nd. That is not Pickett's guy. And even though Pickett got hurt, he is not the guy. It's going to be, it looks like Pickens and Claypool that are going to be taking over that spot. So Johnson's a guy that you want to pretty much sell if you can, or at this point, drop. Tight end Hayden Hurst, terrible. 5.1 could have been better, but the sit was a phenomenal call. Dallas Goedert, one of the top tight ends this season with the Philadelphia Eagles, had one of his worst weeks with only 2 catches and 22 yards. He was 32nd amongst tight ends, 4.2 fantasy points. That's why we do it right there, because that was a great call. So hopefully you at least listen to that one. If you listen to the other ones, it probably wouldn't have been that great, but that was a very good sit call of Dallas Goedert in week 6. So let's move forward to our predictions for week 7. We're always looking forward. We're always trying to cash in. And this coming week is very tough, in my opinion, when I was looking over these games. There's going to be a lot of tight games, I feel like, and not a lot of exciting games. So it's very hard to pick locks. But we're going to try our best. There's one lock that I'm very confident in. We'll get to that shortly. But let's start with Thursday Night Football. And that is the New Orleans Saints. They are plus 1.5 on the road in Arizona against the Cardinals, the over-under of 45. So this game's going to be interesting. A lot of injuries with the Saints. It looks like Chris Olave will be back for them. Not sure yet about Jameis Winston, but Jarvis Landry and Michael Thomas are going to be rolled out. The Cardinals get back Hopkins. So with that being said, I think that the Arizona Cardinals win at home. They need it after losing to the Seattle Seahawks and starting the season 2-4. So give me the Cardinals to win a big one at home, minus 1.5. The over under, I'm going to take over 45. I think that the team can still put up some points, especially the Cardinals with Hopkins back. The Atlanta Falcons are at the Cincinnati Bengals, and that is my first lock of the week. The Atlanta Falcons have covered that spread the entire year. So if you bet them plus whatever, they're covering. They're going to get you money. So why stop now? They're undefeated. They're the only team to be that. So I'm going to take Atlanta plus 6 on the road in Cincinnati. Cincinnati, a big week last week down against the Saints, but Atlanta has been playing some really good football on both sides of the ball, surprisingly. So Atlanta plus 6, but I'm going to take Cincinnati to win the game at home in a field goal type game. The over under of 47.5. I think that it will hit over. Both teams can put up points, and I think it's going to be a high scoring game. Both defenses are, just kind of average and struggling. So I would play the over here. Detroit at Dallas. Detroit's coming in as plus 7 underdogs on the road after coming off of their bye. Dallas should have Dak Prescott back, is what's being said. The over-under is 48. I'm going to play the under here just because it is Dak's first game back. Dallas is a really good defense, and we saw the last time Detroit played, they got smashed by the New England Patriots defense. The Dallas defense is much better, so I think that's why it's going to hit the under, even with Detroit having the top offense in the league. I'm going to take Dallas to cover that 7, though. I think that they win by at least a touchdown, again, because of the poor Detroit defense, but give me Dallas to win, and definitely would play the under. The next lock I'm going with is Tennessee minus 2.5 at home versus the Colts. The Colts had a huge win against the Jaguars last week. Tennessee's coming off the bye, so they're going to be well rested. The last time we saw these two plays, Tennessee did get the job done on the road. Now they're at home. They get that advantage. So give me them -3. The over-under of 42.5. These two teams, besides last week where I thought they would score under, and they barely hit the over the last time they played. So I'm going to say slightly they hit the over in this game, but not by much. Green Bay is -5 on the road against Washington. I will take Green Bay -5. Washington's going to be without Carson Wentz. Taylor Heineke, who actually might not do too bad, is going to be the starter. But Green Bay needs this one. They lose to the Jets at home. Then the week prior in London, they lose to the Giants. Two embarrassing losses. Aaron Rodgers is not going to take that. So I think against a easier Washington team, they get the job done -5. The over under of 40.5. It's tough because I think Washington's going to struggle to put up points with Heineke, and Green Bay hasn't been the best with putting up points. So I'm going to slightly play the under here in this one, but not confidently. There's not a lot of bets this week that I'm confident in, besides a couple of my locks, and probably playing under 48 against the Lions and the Cowboys right now. Tampa Bay -10.5 at Carolina. This is really tough because Tampa Bay, losing to the Pittsburgh Steelers was a shock to a lot of people last week. And there was a lot of shocks in the NFL last week, but that one particularly. Tampa Bay's been struggling to put up points and been struggling to just blow out teams. So I think I'm going to take Carolina to cover that 10.5 at home. Christian McCaffrey, another big day for him, I'm sure. But I'm going to take Carolina to cover, but Tampa Bay to get the job done on the road in Carolina. The over-under of 40.5. I have to say just slightly over. I know they've been hitting under, but I think this time with the defense is going to hit slightly over. I'm locking in the Giants +3 on the road in Jacksonville. The Giants have been getting the job done, beating the Ravens at home and then the Green Bay Packers prior. Jacksonville having issues last week against Indianapolis. I'm surprised with the way the records are and that the Giants, the way that they've been playing, that they are underdogs in this one. Possibly by kickoff on Sunday, I could see them being a 1-point favorite. Either way, I like the Giants +3 if you're giving that to me. On the road, I think that Saquon has a big day. The over-under of 42.5. I'm going to say that it hits the over. All right, Cleveland +6.5 at Baltimore. Cleveland has looked pretty bad. Baltimore, coming in off a loss. Both teams coming off a loss. But definitely Cleveland's looked worse. I think Baltimore at home can get the job done by a touchdown, -6.5, and so of course get the win. The over/under 46.5. I think it's a little bit too high for this division rivalry, so I would play the under. The Jets at the Broncos. The Jets are +3. This could be a game that the Jets could win, but this is a game that the Broncos must win. 2-4. The Jets 4-2. But the Broncos have got to get something together. They're at home. They got the crowd behind them. I think this is going to be a week that they will really focus in on and saying this is a must win. So give me Denver -3, and it might be exactly 3. I think it's going to be a field goal game. They get the job done. Over under 41.5. Going to play the I'm gonna play the under a little bit. Denver's got a really good defense, and it's tough to play up there in Denver. So I'm gonna play under 41.5. Houston at the Las Vegas Raiders. Right now, the Raiders are 7-point favorites at home. Houston is coming in off the bye as well as the Raiders, so they're both going to be refreshed and looking for a win. I like Houston to cover the +7, but I like the Raiders to win in a close one. I think this one will be a little bit high scoring, so I'm going to play over the 45.5, mainly because both defenses aren't that great. They're kind of average. I think Derek Carr can have a big day, and I like Dameon Pierce for the Texans to have a big day. So I like Houston to cover the 7, but the Raiders to win. The Seattle Seahawks travel to the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers getting the job done barely on Monday night. Herbert, one of the worst quarterbacks in week 6. The Seattle Seahawks come in after a nice victory against the Cardinals at home. think this one's a close one too. So I'm going to take Seattle to cover that 6.5. I'm going to take the Chargers to win. Over under of 51.5. I'm going to go with under. I think that 51.5 is just a little bit too high. My last lock and probably my biggest guarantee of the week is Kansas City -3 at San Francisco. I don't know why they're not favored by more, but Kansas City, after almost beating the Bills at home in a tough game, are going to go and get a nice victory in San Francisco. The Niners aren't as good as you think, and losing to Atlanta Falcons by double digits showed that last week. So give me the Chiefs -3 at San Francisco. I'd even take them by a touchdown if it gets up to that as my last lock of the week. The over under 48. I think that it hits under because I think that it'll be Kansas City putting up the points. Pittsburgh at Miami for Sunday Night Football. The Steelers are 7-point underdogs. It looks like Tua will be back, and what I'm hearing now is that Pat Fryermuth and Kenny Pickett should be playing in this one. So I'm going to take Pittsburgh to cover, but Miami to win. Miami ultimately comes and wins this one. The way that Pittsburgh played against Tampa Bay was promising, but the Steelers just cannot beat the Miami Dolphins no matter how good or how bad they are. So give me Pittsburgh to cover the touchdown, Miami to win. The over-under of 44.5. I'm going to play the under in this one as it is Tua's first game back, and it'll take some time to get back into the groove of things after that concussion. And finally, for Monday Night Football, we have the Chicago Bears +7.5 at the New England Patriots. The Bears are just struggling. The Patriots are actually not looking bad with Bailey Zappi. I like the Patriots to win this one in a low-scoring game. I'm even going to say that it goes under the 39.5. And I'm going to take the Patriots to win, but I'm going to take the Chicago Bears to cover that 7.5. I think that it'll be right around 6 or 7. So they barely cover, but the Patriots get the job done at home in a low-scoring affair. So let's get to Week 7 daily fantasy. I'm really excited about this lineup that I created for this week. I think it's going to be a winning one. Derek Carr we're going with for 5,900. Very good price for Derek Carr. Coming off the bye, he has a Houston Texans team at home. I think that he can get the job done for you at that price. We're not overpaying or underpaying. He's kind of going right around some just guys. So you get great value with him at 5,900. For our running backs, very excited about these 3 running backs. I think they're going to win you your daily fantasy this week. We're going with the top 2 fantasy football running backs right now in the NFL with Austin Eckler and Saquon Barkley. Paying 8,300 for Austin Eckler, and we're going to be paying 7,900 for Saquon Barkley. Both guys are just phenomenal, putting up amazing numbers. Eckler should have a huge week against that poor Seattle Seahawks defense, and Saquon Barkley, same against the Jaguars. I think those guys could each put up 2 touchdowns each for you this coming week. We're also going to go with Ken Walker again, getting the job done last week for us at a really good price. 5,800 is very good for him as well this coming week. And in the last 2 games, and one that he didn't even start the week prior, 185 yards and 2 touchdowns. So very promising for him and a very, very good flex play for me there. Wide receiver, I'm going T. Higgins. He is right now at 6,400. Or I should say, I think he's at 6,100, one of the two. I got to do the math. I got 64 on here, but I got 61 in the notes. But it all works out if you get this lineup. He's looked better than Chase this year. He's had an ankle injury and a concussion at the start of the season, but he's really been Burrow's guy until last week when Chase broke out. But I still like T. Higgins more, and you get him for a way better value. I believe this week about $2,000 cheaper to get T. Higgins. And I think that they have a pretty good matchup against that Atlanta defense. So I think T. Higgins will go off, and for the price is really good as the wide receiver 1. Going Allen Lazard. Now he's at 6,100 here. Aaron Rodgers is got to go to somebody, and it's Alan Lazard. No Randall Cobb, so that's one less target. He trusts him, and maybe Dobbs and Tunyon has been coming alive. But Lazard has been the touchdown scorer, and he's been the guy you can rely on in fantasy. So for that price, really like Alan Lazard this week. I think he has a fantastic week against the Commanders defense. And finally, we're going to go with Rondale Moore. He is at 4,500 for the Arizona Cardinals. Moore right now is still the wide receiver two, especially since Hollywood Brown is out with an injury. Even with Hopkins coming back, they have that connection between him and Murray. I know that Murray's going to be getting it to Hopkins, but when they're trying to double Hopkins, Moore's going to be the one open. And for only 4,500, it is a great steal at the wide receiver three position. And Moore, 13 receptions, 117 yards in the last two games. Even if he can get you 5 receptions, 60 yards, he gets the job done at that spot from how strong the top of the lineup is. Now, of course, because we're paying up for Eckler and Barkley, we have to go really cheap. And so how do we do that? Well, we spend our lowest amount of money on a player yet, and that would be Cade Otton at 2,700. Maybe he's not that bad though. Tampa Bay's been struggling with injuries at tight end, and he's been the guy that's been called up. 8 receptions in his last 2 games. So again, if he can get you, 3-4 receptions for 40, 50 yards, and even a touchdown would be insane this coming week against the Panthers. That's not bad for the price that you're paying for him. There'll be other tight ends that do the same that we're paying more for. But I like getting in there at tight end because then I can ride with a high week of Eckler and Barkley in week 7. And for the defense, we're going to go with the Panthers at 2,200. They're really cheap, but they played very well last week. And this coming week, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have not been able to put up a lot of points, even on some bad teams, the Steelers, the Falcons. And of course, the Panthers are bad, but for the price, I think you'll get some good value and you'll like that. And of course, we got to pay low in those areas so we can pay up for guys like Barkley and Eckler. Lastly, we'll talk about the start sit for this week. Of course, we're starting Derek Carr. I think he has a big week coming off the bye at home against the Houston Texans. I'm sitting Jared Goff. He's coming off the bye, but he's got to travel to Dallas. He should have Amon-Ra St. Brown back, but still, I think that Dallas defense is pretty good. We saw Jared Goff struggle against the Patriots defense on the road after a big week the week prior. So I think he's just kind of an average guy this week. I think there's better options if you're streaming quarterbacks. I would sit Jared Goff. I'm going to start Ezekiel Elliott. I sat him last week, but this past week against the Eagles, he gave me some hope. And he is going up against that Lions defense that is just terrible. So I think that both him and Pollard have huge weeks. I would start them both. And I see him getting somewhere around 80 rushing yards and at least 1 touchdown. I'm going to sit Clyde Edwards-Helaire this week for the Kansas City Chiefs on the road against the Niners. The Niners don't have a bad run defense, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire has been getting outworked by Jerick McKinnon. So if you have him, I know he started well. I would sit him this week. Of course, we're starting Al Lazard. I just see a huge week for him. And I'm going to sit Amari Cooper, and he has been one of the best fantasy wide receivers, not just this year, but in the last few weeks. But on the road this year in 2 games, he's only had 26 receiving yards combined in those 2 games, 0 touchdowns. So I don't know if it's a thing with just him being on the road, but they're in Baltimore. I would think that they'd want to utilize him a lot more, but on the road, they just don't do it so far. And those are against some really bad defenses as well. So now you go up against some better defenses. I'm just not as comfortable starting him this week for him to put up huge numbers. Hope I'm wrong because I do have him in a fantasy league, but I think I'm going to be sitting him because I have better options, and one of them being Al Lazard. I'm going to start tight end Evan Engram this week. The only real reason why is he's been pretty good for the Jaguars, but he's facing his former team, the New York Giants. So it's going to be a big game for him. I think I would start him. And I'm sitting Cole Kmet. They're going up against the Patriots defense that's just very tough. And Kmet has not been the tight end that a lot of people have hoped for this year. So I would sit him in week 7. that's a podcast for you guys. Thank you for listening in. Hopefully you enjoyed it and got some good information from it. Hopefully we can win some big bets in week 7, get the ball rolling, as well as in daily fantasy. As a reminder, Wednesdays, 9:30 Eastern time on my personal TikTok, the Beast Benny Cakes. It's listed at the bottom of the screen there. That is where you will find my TikTok live. I'll be going live answering everyone's questions, whether it's about start sit, trades, just general fantasy questions, or sports betting. I will be on there every Wednesday at 9:30. So make sure to check it out. And the reason why it is on there is because the Sports Lock podcast page has just got it started, and you at least need 1,000 followers on there in order to go live. So if you're not following me on TikTok, I make some pretty good content on that Sports Luck podcast page. I put my bets on there and just some fun content and videos. So make sure to follow both accounts, Sports Luck Podcast and the Beast Benny Cakes. I'm also on Instagram, Sports Luck Podcast. So make sure to check it out. Well, thank you guys for listening in for the Week 7 podcast. I will see you guys next week for Week 8. Make sure to subscribe and like on here if you haven't done so already. I really appreciate it. And good luck to you this coming week in Week 7.